The cub came limping from behind the maize stacks near the back of the market, its fur matted, its ribs visible through the shallow rise of its sides. One paw dragged slightly, the claws worn flat. The cry it made wasn't loud. It came in short, confused bursts, a broken mew that day matched the stillness of the midday heat. No one moved at first. Just the clink of a metal bowl dropped in the dust. The hush of hands slowly lowered from baskets and bags. It was near the edge of Okaloo village, where the dry plains met the first soft slope of the mile. Cattle sometimes wandered this far, even the odd warthog, but never this, never a lion, and never this small. Some of the women took their children by the hand and stepped back. The men didn't speak. They watched, as though waiting for the shape to shift into something less impossible. But it was a cub, a real one, thin, lost, and not even trying to hide. Behind the spice cart, an older man stepped forward. Kefin Jaroj had worked in the Southern Conservancies for nearly a decade, back when his legs were younger and his days were spent tracking prints through riverbeds. Now he kept goats and sold honey from his trees. He didn't rush. He just walked slowly, his shadow stretching long beside him. The cub turned its head toward him but didn't run. Its cry grew softer. It didn't bare its teeth, didn't crouch or attempt to flee. Just watched him with wide, sunburnt eyes and let the next sound die in its throat. There was blood around one ear, dried, not fresh. Kefin knelt, one hand down in the dust, palm open. The cub didn't come closer, but it didn't move away either. That was enough that he asked the others for a cloth, not loud, not urgent. One of the market boys brought a potato sack. They laid it under the acacia behind the storage hut, and Kefin guided the cub there without touching it. The animal moved slowly, unsteady, favoring one side. Once in the shade, it curled in on itself, not asleep, not resting, just waiting. Its chest rose quickly, then slowed. Kefa crouched nearby, watching its flanks for signs of pain. There was no foaming, no wounds beyond the dried blood. But the cries hadn't stopped because of comfort. They'd stopped because of exhaustion. A healthy lion cub didn't walk into a human village. A healthy one didn't cry like that in daylight. Someone asked if it had escaped a rescue. Kefin shook his head. No collar, no ear tag. Another voice wondered if the mother had been shot. Kefin didn't answer. He kept watching the way the cub's paws trembled every few minutes, not from cold, but from strain. A girl brought a shallow bowl of water and placed it near the cub's front paws. It didn't drink, just stared at it. When Kefin turned to walk back toward the open clearing, a child followed him. The boy, no more than 8, said he had seen the cub earlier, near the river path, before the market stalls opened. It had come from the east, alone, but it had stopped near a fallen tree, turned its head, and waited, like it was listening. The boy said. Kefin asked, "Did you see anything else?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. Another one, bigger. Kefin didn't press, just asked where the tree was. The boy pointed beyond the ridge, past the cassava rows. There weren't many lions left that close to village lands. A few passed through in bad years, when the drought pushed game west. But this was something else. He returned to the cub, now lying flat, head down. Its eyes still moved, still aware. That meant there was time, but not much. If it had been alone too long, if it hadn't eaten in days, organs could begin to fail. If the wound behind its ear was from another lion, there was a reason it had fled. Cubs abandoned or rejected didn't often survive. And if the mother was near, injured or trapped, she wouldn't last either, and she wouldn't come close to the village again. Not without a reason. Kefin sat beside the acacia and sent word to one of the young men who had a bicycle. Not to the rangers yet, but to Elias, a field officer from the northern range who had helped relocate cats before. he would know how to track without forcing contact. There was a chance the cub had wandered too far and gotten separated. But then why the blood? Why the way it had looked back? As the boy said, by the time the sun passed the midpoint, the cub had managed a single sip from the bowl. It licked its paw twice, then stopped. No more sounds came from its throat. No growl, no breathy calls. But its eyes still opened when someone walked too close. It was still watching. Keffa stayed until Elias arrived at dusk. No one touched the cub. No one tried to feed it yet. If it could cry, it could still ask. And that meant something was missing. Or someone. Either way, they had to find what had driven it into their hands. Because if the mother was alive, she was still nearby. And if she wasn't, there were others who might be. And not all would come as quietly that by morning. The cub had not moved far from the cloth sack laid beneath the acacia. Its breaths were steadier, but shallow. The wound behind its left ear had dried further, a deep nick surrounded by darker bruising. The flies had begun to circle, not aggressively, but drawn by the faint scent of old blood. Kef arrived just after first light, carrying a shallow pan of water with a few clean rags soaked in cool river runoff. He didn't speak to it, just sat again, a few paces away, watching the soft rise and fall of its side. The cub blinked slowly, eyes still dull. It hadn't cried again, but it hadn't stood either. Keffa leaned forward and studied the ear more closely. The wound was jagged, not torn by wire or fence. It was punctured. A lower scrape ran from the base of the skull to the shoulder, hidden mostly beneath the fur. That was no branch, no thorn, and not a snare either. These were shallow, precise bites, not enough to kill, but enough to leave a message. He dipped the cloth in the water and wrung it out until it dripped. Still, he didn't move closer. Only when the cub turned its head slightly and blinked again, not in fear, but fatigue, did Keffa reach out and dab the rag near the wound. The cub flinched but didn't retreat. A low, breathy sound escaped its chest. Not pain, not warning, more like the exhale of a body too tired to object. There was a scattering of tracks in the dust near the storage wall, not from the cub, but something heavier that had brushed through the day before. Elias had arrived quietly just after dark the night before, and had spent the early dawn checking for signs. The trail was uneven, but it was there, paw prints larger than the cub's, spaced irregularly. Some dragged slightly on one side. That matched the boy's story. The child returned as the sun climbed higher. He stood a short distance from the hut, holding a piece of sugared bread, not eating it. His eyes stayed fixed on the cub. Keffa nodded toward him once and asked, "You saw it stop near the tree?" The boy nodded quickly. "It turned its head," he said. "I think something was following it." Keffa motioned him over, slowly. He pointed to the cub's ear, now clean and less swollen. "You see these marks?" The boy leaned in. "That's not from a fall," Keffa continued. "That's from a mouth. Bigger line. Maybe angry. Maybe scared." The boy frowned, gripping the bread tighter. "It was limping," he whispered. "The other one. It wasn't running, just walking slow." Keffa looked out past the fields, toward the low ridge that led toward the foothills. If the larger lion was a mother, and she'd been hurt, she might have told the cub to leave, not with words, but with actions. A bite that said, "Go now, stay away," survived out the cub stirred. Just a twitch of its front leg, then a shift of its weight. It moved its paw toward the bowl and pressed it once, tipping it. Water spilled into the dust. That was the first movement in hours. Small, but enough to show the body wasn't shutting down, yet that Elias returned just before midday. His boots coated in pale grit. He knelt beside Keffa and wiped a hand across his forehead. "She's out there," he said. A few kilometers east. Can't say how long she'll stay put. He paused. She's injured. Kefa looked down at the cub again. How bad? Back leg, Elias said, dragging it. Looked like punctures. Maybe a fight. But no snare. No human contact. That meant one thing. Another lion. Possibly a male. Possibly more than one. The cub might have witnessed the fight, or been the reason for it. And whatever happened after, it had ended with the mother too injured to move fast. And the cub walking, alone, into human hands. They didn't speak much after that. There was no plan yet. If the mother couldn't be moved, and the cub couldn't be returned without danger, they would have to wait. But time worked differently for lions. A few more days without food, and the cub's organs could start to fail. Too much movement on the injured leg, and the mother could collapse before ever seeing her young again. The villagers had begun to check quietly on the cub. From a distance, one of the women left a bowl of goat milk beside the shed. It wasn't touched. Another laid an old cotton shawl near the base of the tree. The cub ignored them all. It only shifted once when a breeze caught the scent of something, smoke from a cooking fire, or something older. Kefa reached for another rag, dampened it again, and let it rest beside the cub's side. His fingers brushed the fur once, coarse, ha. The cub didn't move away, just let its chest rise and fall, slow and steady. Still here, still breathing. They couldn't return it to the wild yet, not without knowing if the mother would come closer. But they also couldn't wait forever. If she was nearby, they'd need to act before another predator came. Because lions didn't cry unless something was missing. And this one had cried for a reason. Elias left before first light, walking the edge of the cassava fields in long, measured steps. He carried no rifle, only a tracking stick and a canvas satchel slung over his shoulder. The trail began behind the last market stall, shallow impressions in the compact earth, paw prints smeared by the softness of the cub's gait. But farther east, where the soil turned fine and dry, deeper marks had begun to appear. These weren't from the cub. They were wider, heavier, with the uneven spacing of an animal trying not to limp and failing. Each print bore a subtle drag on the right rear side, as though the lioness had tried to mask her weakness but couldn't lift the leg clean. The toe spread was wide, full-grown, at least 3 times the size of the cub's. He crouched beside one of the prints and ran his fingers along the groove trailing from it. Not accidental, not weathered, less than a day old. She'd passed through after dusk. The ridge beyond the village rose slowly. Sparse grass gave way to scrubby brush and thorn clusters. Elias moved with care, pausing each time the wind shifted. The sun had begun to rise behind the hills, casting low amber light across the trail. He could hear starlings somewhere ahead, their chatter broken by a sudden hush. That was enough. Something large had passed through, or still waited nearby. He found a broken branch near the edge of a wild guava tree. The leaves had been torn down, not chewed. Beneath it, another print, this one deeper, and close to a patch of disturbed soil where the lioness had laid down. The earth was still warm beneath the top layer. She'd rested here. Recently, farther up, the grass had been pressed flat. Elias slowed. He didn't call out. A lioness with a cub nearby would be protective, even wounded. But one without a cub, injured, confused, and alone, could be unpredictable. He saw her just after the crest, lying beneath the shade of a stunted acacia, belly pressed to the ground, head raised slightly. One back leg was extended awkwardly behind her, the muscle along the haunch swelling against the skin. Her chest rose steadily, but her ears remained still. She'd seen him already. She hadn't run. He dropped to one knee, 30 paces off, didn't move closer, watched her eyes, open, fixed, but not panic. Her breathing was fast, Not from exertion, from holding tension. She was waiting for something. Not escape, not food. Something else. Elias shifted his weight to a crouch and examined the leg from where he stood. No exposed bone. That was something. But there was bruising down the flank and darker marks near the tendon line. The kind made by claws. She'd been in a fight. A serious one. Likely another lion. The timing aligned. If the cub had arrived in the village the day before, and she had come this far before collapsing, she hadn't stopped because she wanted to. She'd stopped because she couldn't continue. He stayed still for another 10 minutes. The lioness didn't rise, but she never looked away. That meant she was alert, but conserving energy. She wasn't defending territory, she was holding position. And there was only one reason the lioness would remain this still. This exposed, she was waiting for something to return. Elias backed away slowly, retreating along the edge of the brush, marking the path in his mind. No need to flag it. No others would come this far. Not without Kazdat at the edge of the ridge. He paused and crouched again. Beneath a low cluster of rocks, he found tufts of fur, not hers. Cub hair, pale, soft, brittle at the ends. She'd been there longer than she should have. Long enough for the cub to stay with her and leave traces. Long enough to believe they'd walk away together. But the cub hadn't waited, or she had sent him off. Somehow the return was slower. Each print Elias passed seemed more urgent now. A map written in silence. She had come alone, injured, followed at least part of the cub's path, and then collapsed where she could still see far ahead. Back at the village, Kefa sat beneath the acacia, the cub now curled beside the bowl. Its posture had shifted, still weak, but more alert. It lifted its head when Elias stepped into the clearing. No sound, just a slow blink. She's alive, Elias said quietly. For kilometers. Injured leg. No visible infection yet. Kefa nodded once. Can she move? Not fast, Elias said. But she's not hiding. She knows we're close. The cub dragged itself slightly forward and placed its paw near the bowl. Then paused. Then withdrew. It didn't need to be told. Some sense deeper than sound had shifted. The way young things sometimes feel a presence they can't name. She waited, Kefa said, voice low. Elias nodded again. She still is. There was no plan yet. The vet had been alerted. But without sedation equipment, no transport could be attempted, not yet. And moving the cub back toward the mother might panic her, or push her to flee, risking collapse. If they did nothing, the cub might weaken further. But if they acted too soon, they could lose both. The balance was fragile. The space between presence and interference was thin. She hadn't run. The cub had stopped crying. Both were still breathing. That would be enough, for now. But time was tightening, and so was the distance between them. The call came just after midday, from a woman who lived near the far edge of the village, beyond the millet fields, close to the last homestead before the brush thickened into uncut grasslands. She had seen something large move in the tall grass behind her maize rows. Not moving fast, not hunting, just there. She hadn't gone closer, just watched until it lowered itself into the shade, the movement stiff and careful. Then she sent word. Elias and Kefa walked the stretch on foot, cutting between the fields, following the ridge in silence. The cub had not cried again. It had rested most of the morning beneath the storage hut, eyes open, ears occasionally twitching at distant sounds. When they passed it on the way out, it didn't lift its head, but its eyes followed them until they disappeared past the tree line. The grass near the homestead rose to waist height, scattered with cassia and thorn stems. At the far end, beneath the curve of a weathered fig tree, the lioness lay. She had not moved from the spot since the woman first saw her. From a distance, she looked like a part of the land, ribs forming ridges in the light, the arc of her spine catching sun between shadows. But she was alive, barely. Keffa signaled for distance. No sudden approach. They crouched together 20 meters away, staying low. Elias raised a hand slowly, not to reach for anything, just to let her see that he was not hidden. She saw them. Her eyes did not blink, but they were open, watching. Her mouth opened slightly. A sound came from her throat, not loud, not angry. A warning born from instinct, not choice. But her body did not rise, could not rise. Her leg was worse now, swollen above the joint, with blood dried around the outer flank. She had not tried to clean it. That was another sign, not from laziness, but pain. The effort had become too much. Elias moved half a step forward, still crouched, testing the boundary. She growled again, softly, without force. Her head lifted, then dropped back to the grass. No charge, no retreat, just presence. They backed off. The situation had changed. She was no longer distant, no longer a sign in the dust or a print on the trail. She was here, on the edge of the human world, no more than a few steps from fence posts and cooking smoke. And still she had not fled, not even when seen. Keffa sent a runner to bring the cub. It took nearly half an hour. The animal was too weak to walk far, but not too far gone to try. They wrapped it gently in the same cloth sack, its front paws resting over the boy's arms. He held it close, breathing slowly. The cub didn't resist, didn't squirm, just stared forward, alert but silent. When they reached the grass line, Elias took it from him. He didn't approach the lioness directly. Instead, he set the cub down 5 meters away, behind a cluster of low shrubs, then stepped back. The cub remained still for a moment, then turned its head. Ears flicked once, and then, slowly, with effort, it stood. It limped forward, first one paw, then another. The dry stems rustled around it. The lioness raised her head again. No growl this time, just a slow exhale, so quiet it barely moved the air. Her eyes blinked once. The cub reached her side and pressed its head to her neck. Her front paw twitched, not in pain, but in response. She did not turn away. She did not move, but she was still awake. They lay like that in the tall grass, bodies close, both breathing hard, but together now. Her ribs pushed outward with each strained inhale. His flank rose in shallower rhythms, but steadier. Neither of them spoke. Of course, they didn't need to. From a distance, Elias and Keffa crouched again. No one else spoke. Even the wind had softened. She didn't leave him. Keffa said quietly, "No." Elias replied. She told him to go, but she never left. They stayed until late afternoon, watching for signs of distress. But the cub remained by her side, occasionally shifting, placing one paw over her back, then lying still again. The lioness did not sleep, but she no longer tried to rise. There was still danger. Infection could spread in her leg. If the wound festered, if maggots took hold, she could decline quickly. If the cub was not fed soon, his strength could fail completely. But for the first time in days, neither of them was alone. Elias made the call to the vet station. They would prepare mild sedation for the lioness. The plan wasn't capture, not yet. Only treatment, only comfort. They would wait until nightfall, then return, quietly, gently, with no force unless necessary. And if she fled, they would let her go, because she had done something most wouldn't believe. Wounded, starving, hunted by scent and time, she had followed the cub into human land, not to take him back, not to challenge, but simply to be near him. If this was where he was, this was where she'd wait. The cub shifted once more and let out a soft, almost inaudible moan. The lioness lifted her chin, and for a moment, even with the flies circling and the dirt caked around her eyes, she looked like something whole again, something more than broken, even if only for a breath. The tarp went up before sunrise, strung between two fig trees. Its faded blue fabric fluttered softly in the breeze. The villagers had brought it from the maize store, the only one large enough to cover both lions from the direct light. Elias adjusted its corners, tying the ropes low enough to shade without brushing the ground. The lioness had not moved during the night. She remained curled in the grass, her back legs still swollen, her breathing steady but shallow. The cub lay beside her, his side pressed to hers, barely shifting even as insects crept near his tail. He hadn't cried again, not once, not since he'd reached her. A bucket of water sat a few meters off, collected from the borehole and poured into a shallow metal basin. Another basin held strips of clean cloth and a bottle of diluted antiseptic. No one moved quickly. No one spoke above a whisper. The vet arrived mid-morning. A tall woman with quiet eyes and sleeves rolled past her elbows. Her name was Dr. Wanja. She had worked with lions before, in more remote ranges, but not like this. Not so close to a village. Not where the people hung back behind fences. Not in fear, but in respect. She approached slowly, crouching as she came within range. The lioness lifted her head slightly, then dropped it again. Her mouth did not open. Her tail didn't twitch. She had no strength left to protest. The cub stood when the vet knelt. Just once, not to run, not to growl. He moved 2 steps forward, then laid down again, between the woman and his mother. His eyes did not leave her hands. "I won't hurt her," Wanja said gently, voice low. "It's just to help." Elias stood nearby, watching every motion. Kefa held the dart, already prepared with a mild sedative, enough to relax her, not to fully knock her out. Too much would risk her breathing. Too little, and she might wake and panic. The dart struck clean, in the shoulder muscle. The lioness flinched, but didn't rise. Her breathing quickened, then slowed again. Within minutes, her eyes closed. Not deeply, but enough that the cub pressed closer. His front paw touched the curve of her ribs. He did not sleep. He just watched. Wanja worked quickly, cleaning the wound first, then inspecting the swelling along the leg. There were puncture marks, too deep enough to risk infection, likely from a male, possibly during a territorial clash. The flesh was hot beneath the skin, but no foul smell yet. No necrosis. She stitched 2 of the wounds. The others she left open for drainage. Every motion was slow, measured. She didn't rush, but she didn't linger either. The cub stayed beside her the entire time, unmoving except for the rise and fall of his sides. One of the villagers brought another bowl of water, left it near the base of the tarp. The cub didn't approach, not until Wanja had finished cleaning the tools and stepped back, wiping her hands on the cloth. Then, cautiously, the cub turned and took 3 steps toward the bowl. He drank, slow, steady laps, then returned. They gave the lioness space to wake on her own. The sedative would wear off within an hour, if her system tolerated it well. No one touched her again. They removed the tarp's lower ropes to allow more breeze. The grass had flattened around them now, to shallow hollows carved by weight and time. Kefa returned to the hut and brought back another cloth sack, this one folded with raw strips of goat meat, leftovers from the morning butchering. He laid them near the basin, not too close. Let them choose if they would eat. The cub sniffed once, then ignored it. Near midday, the lioness stirred. Just her paw at first, then her flank. Her head lifted slowly. Her eyes fluttered, blinked once, twice, then opened fully. The cub raised his head as well. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the lioness turned her head, only slightly, just enough to face him. Their eyes met, not wide, not alarmed, just seeing, breathing, still here. She didn't growl, didn't rise, but her chest lifted more fully now, and her ears twitched at a distant sound. A bird's call from the ridge. The cub shifted closer again, resting his head against her shoulder. She blinked once more, then let her body settle. Dr. Wanja remained at the edge of the tarp, crouched beside Elias. "We give her one more day," she said quietly. "If she holds, she might walk again, and if not," he asked, "we treat again, but we don't move her. Not unless we must." The cub had not left her side in days. He'd crossed fences, fields, and humans sent to reach her. And now, even with strangers nearby, he had not turned away. One of the younger boys brought a second tarp, just in case the weather turned. The sky remained pale, but the wind had begun to shift. A storm might come tomorrow, or it might not. Beneath the blue fabric, the lioness exhaled deeply and closed her eyes again. The cub did not sleep. He watched until dusk.